Welcome ninjas to the Coder Dojo. How's everyone been? Did you have a nice weekend? So, is everyone ready to continue working on our Splatoon project? Now, if you weren't here for Splatoon Part 1, then here is a link to Splatoon Part 1. It's called Part 2 because I've just copied it across so that I can work on it right now. And now I'll keep that up to date. I'll keep saving it. So if you get stuck as we're working on Splatoon, you can just check that link that I've left. And you can sort of see where my coding's at. So what we have so far, well, actually, no. What we are aiming to put into Splatoon is we've got our movement working. My fingers are in the wrong place. It's very hard to control two players at once. I recommend playing this with like your mum or your dad or one of your siblings or a friend, and then it's a lot more fun. And so what we need to do next is we need to do a timer that stops the game, and then we need to do this code here. Where what it does is watch these variables. These variables are going up, and it calculates who has painted more than the other. In this case, the red player has painted more than the blue player. It puts like a score in front of it, and it will declare who wins and who loses. And there's even possibility, it's very unlikely, but there's even possibility for there to be a draw. Actually, I wonder if I just, oh no, that's okay. Anyway, so that's what we need to end up getting ourselves to in part 2. All right, let me just check the chat to see how everyone's going. Hello, Ms. Yeti, how's it going? Hello, Falcon Fab Lab Coder Dojo. Hello, Cool Trish. Lovely to have you here with me today. Okay, so just as a quick recap, let's go through some of the code from part 1 while we just make sure there's enough time for everyone to arrive for today's session. So we've got our 2 players, and they both work basically the same. They've got different controls. Player 1 is controlled by the arrow keys on the keyboard on the right side, and player 2 is controlled by the WASD keys on the keyboard. But aside from that, the coding's exactly the same. So the main code loop is over here underneath when green flag clicked. We make sure we erase all of the painting that we did, all of the pen drawing from the previous game. We have a starting position for our 2 players, for each of our players. And then we have this my block here, this start painting. And that just has some code in there which is to do with the pen extension that starts the painting process. And this is where you choose the color of the paint that your character is using. And you can also choose the size of the paintbrush, so to speak. Which Scratch calls all of this the pen, which makes sense as well. And then we've just got 4 repeating my blocks: move up, move down, move left, move right. And each of these is basically an if the proper button is being pressed, then we point this sprite in the direction that we want to put that we want it to go, and we move a certain number of steps. There's also this line next costume, which causes these sprites, which are very cool. They're quite new, I think. I haven't adjusted them before, just to cycle through so it looks like that they are walking, which I think is very cool. All right, so that's a bit of an overview of what we've done so far. So what we're going to need to do today is going to need to create a sprite that's going to count the paint. And that's going to be interesting because it's going to cover something that we haven't done much of before, which is changing a MyBlock so that it runs with what's called, it runs without screen refresh. So I don't know if you've ever done that in one of your projects before, but it's very useful, and I'm going to explain exactly how that works when we come to it. So I'm just going to bring up my original program over with my notes here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to start off with some fun stuff. So let's start off with by making a sprite called Game Over. And that's going to be a sprite that declares whether the red player won, the blue player won, or the or it was a draw. So to do that, basically, what I've done is you go into the bottom right corner, you look at this choose a sprite, you go up to and click on paint. So now you should have a new sprite. It should be called Sprite 1. We're going to rename this one to Game Over. Okay, so we've renamed this sprite as Game Over. You can rename a sprite in like the middle right of the screen. And then we are going to need to make a piece of text. So have a look in your tools in the top left corner, and you'll notice one of them is a T. Click on that T for text, and then click somewhere. Now there's a few things that we can do. So we can change the font that we're using. Yeah, if you click somewhere on the drawing section, you can change the font that we're using. I actually really like the Pixel font, but you can use whatever font you like. You can change this font in sort of like the top left-ish corner. You'll see something that says Sans Serif, which is one of the fonts, and you can change it to something else. So once you've gotten that, we'll type in red player wins. So once you've got this, you can actually very handily make it bigger. You can move it around, and you can do all of this by clicking on Select in one of your drawing tools in the menu over in the top left corner there. So you can move this sprite around, and we're going to be able to change the color of the sprite, and we can even give it an outline, which I quite like. So currently, I've got purple, so you might have a different color. So if you go into the top left corner and click on Fill, and then you can play around with these sliders here until you get a color that you like. I'm just going to go for a really deep red here. I'll give you just a bit of time just to sort out what color that you'd like. Ms. Yeti says, I've been working on my own interpreter. Ooh, interesting. How's that been going, Ms. Yeti? Yeah, what have you been using to make your own interpreter? That sounds complicated. So, have a bit of a play around with your text box, and one thing that you should probably do is when you drag it around, you can see there's a little blue plus shape or cross shape in the middle. And you can see that there's also kind of like a crosshairs, or like a cross shape with a circle around it in the middle of the drawing area. This allows you to move your object so that it locks right in, that blue cross locks right in with the crosshairs in the middle of the drawing area. And now you know that your text is right in the middle of the screen, which is just nice. It's just nice to know that. Once the other thing that we can do is in the top left corner, we can click on Outline. And currently it's set to this sort of white with a red line, meaning that there is no outline. So I'm just going to set a black outline because I actually like the way that that looks. And so now we've got this nice kind of blocky red player wins. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to name this costume. So to name the costume, you go up into the top left corner and you see where it's got written costume 1 next to costume. And we're just going to erase costume 1. And we're going to type in red player wins. This is going to be important later because we're going to switch costumes depending on who has won. Alrighty. So while everyone's doing that, oh, I just called it red player wins. Yeah, my spelling is not great today. Hopefully I've fixed all that now. All right, while you guys are all doing that and sorting out your graphic for your red player wins costume, I'm just going to check on the chat. Oh, you're using Python, Ms. Yeti. Very nice. And you're using batch as well. Wow, that sounds really interesting. Very interesting indeed. All right, so we've got our red player wins. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do something that's going to make our life a lot easier than having to do this again. We're going to right-click on, in the top left corner, there should be our red player wins costume and a little 1 in the corner of it. We're going to right-click on that costume, top left corner, just underneath where it says code. And then you'll notice it comes up with a menu that says duplicate or export. We're going to duplicate, and then we're going to duplicate again. So now we should have red player wins 2, and red player wins 3. So let's go to red player wins 2, our second costume. Let's rename this blue player wins. And then let's go to the third one, and let's rename that draw. And when I say draw, I mean no one wins. It's a draw. I don't mean drawing with a pen or something. All right, so we should now have our 3 costumes are named red player wins, blue player wins, and draw. So what we need to do now is when you've got blue player wins selected, it's still, the graphic is red player wins. So make sure that you've got the select tool active, and you should be able to double click, and then you can rename, you can retype in blue player wins. And you can even change the color of the text. So yeah, in coding and using tools in general, we always want to do things the easy way. We don't want to have to do things the hard way, making things from scratch, so to speak, making things. There's always usually an easier way. So we've got our blue player wins graphic. Now let's double click on this one and type in draw. Or you can say it's a draw. It's a draw. And then I'm going to make this black filled. Yeah, that works. All right, hope you're having fun doing some of your graphics. And again, just make sure that you select your graphic, your text graphic, and you drag it so that it's nice and centered. Okay, so we should now have our sprite called Game Over with 3 costumes. The code for this is very simple. We're going to make sure that this hides at the beginning of the game. We should also probably make sure that this sprite is right in the middle of the screen. Now you can do this manually by dragging it around until it looks right, but there's an easier way of making sure that this sprite is in the very middle of the screen. How do we do that? Put your answers into chat. Very easy way, by using coordinates. And when I say coordinates, I already talked about it in last session, so I won't go into it in a lot of detail this session. We've got in the middle right of the screen, we've got our coordinates for x and y. The x coordinate controls how far left or right the sprite is on the screen, and the y coordinate is a number that controls how high or low it is on the screen. And in the middle is 0. 0 is always in the middle. So if you just type in 0 next to the x coordinate with our sprite selected, and 0 next to the y coordinate with the sprite selected, I should say, then we're going to make sure that it's nicely in the middle of the screen. Cool. Okay. Yes. Perfect. Perfect. Ms. Yeti and Cool Trish got it completely correct. All right. So good. So we're going to put some code in. We're going to use broadcasts to trigger this to show. And so we haven't coded in when the broadcasts are first made, but we should be able to code in what happens when the broadcasts are received. If you haven't done broadcasts before, don't worry, this will make a lot of sense later. So for now, let's make sure that at the beginning of this game over sprite hides itself. So first things first, go to events, the yellowish category on the left side of the screen, the top left corner-ish. Once you've clicked on events, drag out when green flag clicked. Once you've done that, we're going to go to looks, and we're going to grab a hide line. And that's all that we need there. And then what we're going to do, so at the beginning of the game, this is going to hide itself. All right, so the next thing we're going to do, we're going to use some broadcasts. Now, I like to try not to use broadcasts very often, but in this case, this is just a nice, easy way of doing it, I think. And it is useful to know how broadcasts work. So we need to look in events still. Should hopefully, yeah, so go to events, the yellow category, and look for when I receive message 1. Drag out that when I receive message 1. A broadcast is basically a signal that is sent out to all sprites. All sprites receive it, and they will do something if they have code that says when I receive this broadcast. Now there are multiple, we can make our own broadcasts. Currently this broadcast is called message 1. We don't want it to be that, because we're going to use some more descriptive terms for our broadcasts. So click on that white triangle, click on new message, and type in blue player wins. So when we receive this message, blue player wins, we are going to switch costume. So you go to looks, the purple category in the top left corner of the screen, click on looks, and then drag out switch costume to, and mine says switch costume to draw, but click on that white triangle, and then select blue player wins. So now, when I receive blue player wins, switch costume to blue player wins, and the other thing that we need to do is show. So that's pretty straightforward. We're going to code in a broadcast that tells this sprite when it should show itself and to what costume it should switch itself to. So what we need to do is we need to copy this. So we're going to right-click on when I receive blue player wins. And you'll see you get 3 options. Normal click on duplicate. Now you should have an entire copied bit of this code. And we're going to do that again. And so now we should have what we should be able to do is for these 2 copies, one of them, click on the white triangle, click on new message, and type in red player wins, and then switch costume to red player wins, and then the 3rd copy of this broadcast receiving piece of code, do draw. When I receive draw, to call the broadcast draw, and switch costume to draw. Okay, So now we should have 3 blocks of code, each that say when I receive blue player wins, switch costume to blue player wins, show. And then the same thing for red player wins, and the same thing for draw. So I'll just leave this up on the screen just for a little bit, just to make sure everyone's got it. It's pretty straightforward though, pretty self-explanatory. And so now we get into the interesting stuff, because this is pretty straightforward. So now let's code something that will count up all of the paint on our screen once the game is over. All right, just give me a moment. I'm just getting my notes in order and just making sure you've got enough time to finish up that code. How's everyone going? Okay. So, what we're going to do now is we're going to make a new sprite, and we are going to draw this sprite. So, go hover over the cat face in the bottom right corner, go up to where it says paint. You should now have sprite 1. We are going to rename this as paint counter. This is going to count how much paint we have. Then what we are going to do is we are going to, there might be a way of doing this without converting to bitmap, but just because this is the way that I found it was easiest to do, we're going to convert to bitmap. So look at the bottom left screen, corner of your screen. You should have a button that says convert to bitmap. When you click it, which I want you to do now, I want you to click it, you'll notice it should now say convert to vector. We're going to make this a tiny little black dot. So to do that, what we are going to do is we are going to click on the brush tool, the brush drawing tool, and then when you click on it, you'll notice it should already be black, or if not, then change it so that the color is black. It doesn't actually matter what color it is, to be fair, actually. And then you'll notice that there is the size of the brush that we have, and it should be set to 10. Set it all the way down to 1. And then zoom in a lot, and you should notice that you now have this tiny little 1 pixel. And you can click that, and it may not even go fully in the middle, but you should now have this 1 pixel that you can do. And you just click that right in the middle, and you should now have a tiny little dot. So what we're going to do now is we're going to code this dot so that it basically checks every pixel of the screen once the game is over for what color is present. And now in my original version, I think I use I use 4 pixels, so like 1, 2, 3, 4. So if we run into problems with this version, we'll come back and we'll change that. But I think for now it's fine. We should have a bit more of an accurate result from a 1 pixel sprite. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we need to make some variables. Because these variables are how we are going to keep track of how much paint has been left on the screen. So click on variables, that orangey category in the middle left of the screen, and then click on that make a variable, that gray button. Once you click on that, you should be able to name this variable, and we're going to call this first variable blue player score. We need to make sure that for all sprites is clicked. It should selected. For all sprites should already be selected by default anyway. We're going to do this again. Click on make a variable, and we're going to call the other variable red player score. Okay. And you can even delete the my variable if you want. Optional. Otherwise, just keep going with me. All right, so we should now have a variable called blue player score that you should see both on this screen in the top right and also in the top left of our variables section, and you should have a variable called red player score. This is just going to be a number, and it's going to count pixels of paint. What we need to do is we need to make sure, first of all, that we set these back to 0 when we're starting a new game. So grab when green flag clicked from events. So go to events, the yellow category, grab out when green flag clicked, and then go back to variables, and you should have set variable to 0 or set blue player score to 0 as one of the options there. Grab out 2 of those, set variable to 0, and make sure that one of them sets blue player score to 0 and the other one sets red player score to 0. So you should have both of those variables being set back to 0 when the green flag is clicked, so when we start the game. Now what we're going to do is, just to break this down into pieces so it's easy to see what all of it does, we're going to make 3 my blocks. So click on the red category in the bottom, in sort of the middle left of the screen where it says my blocks. And then in the top left, click on make a block. The first one we're going to call timer. So yeah, just call this block timer. So now it should give you a define timer. Just drag that off to the side so it's out of your way. And in the top left corner, it should have a little red block called timer. So grab that and put it underneath our setting variables. So we're going to do this again. Click on make a block, and this time call this count paint. Should now have this define count paint on the screen. Drag that off to the side so it's out of the way, and drag the little count paint from the top left corner so that it's underneath timer, and the order of this is very important. And then the final my block is going to be calculate winner. Again, drag off that define calculate winner and drag the little mini calculate winner out. So this is the overall code. This makes sense. First, the game is going to have a timer that calculates when the game is over. At the end of that, it's going to count up all the paint on the screen, and then it's going to calculate who is the winner. So that's just a nice way of arranging our code. We're going to put code into these define timer, define count paint, and define calculate winner, so that we can have a good idea of what our code does, what sections of it do what. So the first one that we're going to do is define timer. I'm going to zoom in on this. So go and find your define timer. This is what we're going to do. So first of all, let's decide, first of all, we need to make a variable for our timer. So we've made variables already. Click on variables, the orangey category in the middle left of the screen. Click on make a variable. Call this one timer. And drag out a set variable to something, to 0. And then select the variable that you want is timer. So click on that white triangle. So now we should have set timer to 0. Now this is where we decide how long do we want our games to run for. So I think I put 30 seconds. You can change that if you want. And you can change this later if you want. So let's say set timer to 30 seconds. All right. So now let's grab a repeat until. Now, if you've made a timer in games before, then this will be familiar to you. So go to Control, the orangey category on the left, grab out a repeat until. So we want to do this until the timer reaches 0. So we're going to do it this way today. We're going to grab an equals. So go to Operators, the green category, grab out that code that's like space equals 50. It's a little six-sided shape, little jewel shape, little hexagon shape. Drag that out, and you'll notice it fits just nicely into next to where it says repeat until. So now we should have repeat until something equals 50. We want to change what's in these gaps here. We need to ask the question, has our timer reached 0? So we go back to variables. We look for our variable timer in the top left corner. Should be a nice round little code line there. Our variable timer, drag that out, that little round timer variable, and put it into the first gap. And then after the equals, type in 0. So repeat this until the timer has reached 0. We are going to grab a change variable by. So this is important. We don't want to set variable to. We want to change variable by. So drag that out. And mine says blue player score, but that's not what we want to change. We want to change the timer. We want to make the timer go down 1 second every second, if that makes sense. So we want to change timer by, and it'll say change timer by 1. We want to change that to -1 because our timer is ticking down. And then we are going to make sure that we don't do this all at once. So we need to make sure that we wait a second each time. So go to Events, Control, look for the top option, which should be wait 1 second, and put that underneath change timer by -1. Have a look at this code. This is a complete code for having a timer that counts down to 0. There's little things that we could do to improve it, make it a little bit less prone to maybe if something glitches out. But for now, I think this is good enough. So this timer, we set the timer how long we want it to be, 30 seconds. And then we change the timer by -1, so we take 1 second away, and we do that until the timer reaches 0. And how often do we do it? We do it once per second. So we should now have this timer that's ticking down. And then, and only after the timer has reached 0, the code will be able to continue. So the code will be working through this loop, this repeat loop. So if you can imagine this, literally the computer is reading this line by line by line. It's going to do change timer by -1. All right, take 1 away. Wait 1 second. It waits. And then what am I meant to do? Oh, I repeat this. And I repeat this until the timer reaches 0, just like it did there. And then after it's finished this repeat until, but only after, then it's going to move on to the next thing. And what's the next thing? The next thing is going to be count paint. That's the next in our order of our master code that sort of is over here. That contains all of the rest of this code. That's all in our defines, all in our my blocks. Sometimes in coding we call these functions. It's a little bit more complicated than that at times, but that is one of the sort of parallels there between Scratch and sort of other coding. We can call these functions. So let's have a look at our define count paint, our count paint function. So what we're going to do is, so we have this paint counter. We're going to make this paint counter start in the top left corner and count every pixel, see if it's touching red or blue, add to the blue player score and the red player score accordingly, and it needs to do that for every pixel. So let's start off by making our paint counter start in the top left corner of the screen. So what's the top left corner of the screen? So in coordinates. And not off the screen, but what the top left corner pixel of the screen here. And if you don't know the answer, sit tight, I'm about to tell you. If you do know, then put your answer in chat. So so we want to get a go to X, Y. So click on dark blue category motion. That's motion. Top left corner of the screen. And then look for a line that says go to X. Then there'll be a number, Y, another number. This will send our paint counter sprite somewhere on our screen, depending on what these numbers are. Remember, the numbers coordinate to every pixel in our game on the screen. Yes, Ms. Yeti, got it in one. The top left corner pixel of the screen is minus 240, 180. So you'll notice I have this graph on in the background, and I've discussed coordinates before. But if you get stuck on coordinates, maybe tune in for another session, like a part 1 beginner session, and I'll explain it in more detail then. But yes, we know the top left corner, the coordinate is x minus 240, x minus 240, and y 180. So that will make our paint counter go to the top left corner of the screen. That's good. Then we need to make sure that it goes all the way from the left part of the leftmost pixel all the way and does the entire first row of pixels all the way to the right side. So how many pixels are there between the left side and the right side? How many pixels are there in a row? And this is to do with screen resolution, which, is an interesting topic, but we won't go into too much detail. Now, if you don't know the answer, that's fine. I'm about to tell you. So the reason that I ask this is because we need to go into control and get a repeat. So look in control and find repeat 10. So drag out that repeat 10 and put it underneath our go to X, Y. Now, the number of pixels we want to do this for, Ms. Yeti got it right again, 480. Because we go from minus 240 all the way to the middle, which is 0, and then we go all the way to the right, which goes up to 240. So you've got these minus numbers going further down the further left we go, and you've got the plus numbers going up the further right we get, and they're a mirror of each other. So a minus number is always going to be like mirrored through the center by its positive number. So we need to do this 480 times. So we're going to put in some code now. We're going to grab an if statement. You should already be in control. Grab out if. So you should have if, so go to sensing and look for touching color. I don't like using touching color, but it's what we need to do in this particular game. Grab out if touching color. And I think, and put that inside the if, so if touching color. Now, I think what we should be able to do is, so I have started off with this sort of brown color as the touching color, question mark. If you click on that color there, you can select the color manually, but we might not get the exact shade of red, the exact shade of blue that we need. So once you click on that color, you'll notice there's a little ink blotter tool there. Click on that ink blotter tool, and you'll notice now what you can do, and that's the little symbol. I don't know if you know what an ink blotter looks like, but it's the little symbol at the bottom of all the color wheels. And now what it will let you do is it will let you go over your game window and select the color that you want. So I'm going to make sure that I've got a bit of color down there from my characters so that I can select the exact red color that I want. So we've got this if touching color red, then we want to add 1 score to the variable red player score. So how do we do that? Put your answers in chat if you know. If you don't know, I'm going to tell you now. we go to variables, the orangey category on the middle left of the screen, click on variables, and look for change variable by 1. So change, and I've got blue player score written here, by 1. Drag that out and put it inside the if. There should be a gap in the if, so if touching color red, then, and then you'll notice we need to change it to make sure that the variable is the right one, so we're going to select red player score. So you should now have if touching color red, then change red player score by 1. So now we just need to copy this. Right click on the if, normal click on duplicate, and then just put that. Now this is important where you place this. It's important that this is what's called nesting. When you have stuff inside an if, it only runs when the if comes up yes. So you've got to make sure that this if touching color, we're going to do the same thing for if touching color blue, goes underneath and not inside the previous if. So if you're looking at my screen, you'll notice I could put it right here underneath change, and then it's inside the previous if. We don't want it there, because then it will only run if the previous question came up yes. Am I touching color red? Yes. Then it's going to run the other piece of code, which we don't want. That might be a little bit confusing, so if you don't understand it, don't worry. The important thing is these two ifs, neither of them are inside each other, but they are both inside the repeat. So we've now got if touching color red again, then change red player score by 1. So what we need to do now is click on that red color, just like we did before. Click on that little symbol at the very bottom of the color wheels. Select our other color. Now I've been using red and blue. You might be using different colors, and that's perfectly reasonable. And then we've got to make sure that we're making the right variable go up. So select blue player score. Okay, so now we should have repeat 480 times if touching color red, then change red player score by 1. If touching color blue, then change blue player score by 1. Great! We're counting all the pixels of paint. There's one more thing that we need to do, I should say. We need to make sure that the pixel moves 1 pixel right each time it does this. Otherwise, it's going to count the same pixel over and over and over and over again. So how do we do that? We go to Motion, top left corner, and we look for change X by 10. Drag that out and put it inside the repeat, but underneath our ifs. So it's not inside the ifs. So now we should have this if statement, and change X by 10. We want to change it just by 1 pixel. Onto the next pixel. Okay, so this is enough to do an entire row. So let's hit play and do some painting up in the top row. Now this may or may not work due to a reason. So if it doesn't work, don't worry, because we'll do the next bit of code and then it will work. And then just wait for your timer to run out, and we'll see if it adds. So when the timer runs down, yeah, it doesn't work. That's okay. What we're going to do is we'll do the next thing in our code. That's all right. I know why that is. It's because of the placement of where our pixel is. Don't worry about it. Okay. So this code does 1 row. We want to do all of the row. We want to do all of the We want to do all of the rows. We want to go across the first row and then do all the rows like this, moving all the way down. Okay? So we work our way all the way from the left to the right. Now we need to do that over and over again, each time moving down by 1. So, first of all, we need to get another repeat. So how many pixels are there moving from the topmost pixel to the bottommost pixel? Put your answers into chat. If you don't know, that's fine. Follow me. We're going to go to Control. We're going to get another repeat 10. Drag out that repeat 10. Now this is important. This needs to go around the repeat 480. So the way that you've got to drag it is you've got to drag it so that the actual repeat 10 line, the line with the actual word repeat and 10 on it, is in between the go to XY and the repeat 480. So if you're looking at my screen, you should see it here. Then you let go. And what we're going to do is we're going to change this. And Mezietti, you've got it right. We're going to change that repeat 10 to repeat 360. That's how many pixels it is from the top of the screen to the bottom of the screen in Scratch. And that makes sense because, again, 0 is in the middle. We go 180 up. We go 180 down. So altogether, 280 is 360. Okay. So this should cover every pixel on the screen. It goes 480 across, and then it goes down one, and it does another 480 across, and it does this 360 times for each row that we have. There's one more. There's just two more lines we need to add. We need to add the lines that in between each row we need to go down to the next row of pixels. So first things first. Once we get to the end of the row, which is basically, you should see that they are like the end of our repeat 480 after that. So there's these two kind of orangey, like, I don't know exactly what I would call them, maybe terminations. Anyway, you've got these two orangey lines with no text on them. We need to put it right in between those. We need to set the X all the way back to the beginning. So our paint counting dot goes from the end all the way back to from the right side all the way back to the left side. So to do that, we should still be in motion, I think. Have a look for set X2. So you go to motion, the dark blue category, and you look for set X2. It'll be set X to a number, I should say, sorry. Set X to, in my case, it says minus 64. We want to make sure that we've set X to minus 240. So grab out that set X to minus 240. So that'll take our dot all the way back to from the right side to the left side. Now what we need to do is we need to make sure it goes down one. And that's nice and easy. We just change Y by minus 1. And that will make it go down to the next row. All right, so this code should now count every pixel on the screen for color. Now, if we move these variables out of the way, let's maximize it. Let's hit play. Let's do some painting. And let's see what happens when we let the timer run out. What do you think is going to happen? And hopefully we can see this little black dot. Or maybe we're not going to be able to. Maybe the black dot is too small. Wait, no, it's doing something. Oh, yep, here we go. So here's the problem. It's taking a really, really long time. We can't see it but you can see now it's slowly ticking up. And now, if you make it big, you might be able to see this tiny little black dot is moving along really slowly. That's going to take far too long. So we need to make sure that so we can fix this if we right-click on where it says Define Count Paint. So right-click on where it says Define Count Paint. That's this code here. And then normal click on where it says Edit. So you should now be at this screen. Now there's a little tick box in the bottom left corner of this little make a block window that says Run Without Screen Refresh. This is going to speed up this code a lot. I won't go into too much details other than when you run Scratch code that does a lot of movement, it artificially slows down so that you can see it move. Because a lot of coding will happen very fast, and it will happen faster than we can see. And I think both simultaneously as a limitation of Scratch and also simultaneously so that we can all see our code working, it will slow down movement so that the movement happens at a speed that we can see it. We're going to tick this box to make the movement happen a lot faster. So once you've clicked on Run, once you've clicked Run Without Screen Refresh, let's try it again. So we need to wait for this timer to run down. If I'd thought ahead, we could have changed the timer to be down to 10 seconds or something. So what should happen now is that we'll see this black dot moving, or we might not see it moving because it's going to move very, very fast. And it'll take just a little bit of time, and you can watch these variables go up. So let's make it nice and big. So you can see these variables go way up, really fast, and there we go. It's counted up all the paint, and it said the blue player got this many pixels of paint, and the red player got this many pixels of paint. So then, all we need to do is define the winner. And this should be relatively easy, because we've already got our broadcasts working in our game over screen. So have a look for define, calculate winner. Aha, Phase Viswa, how's it going? What I will do, we're doing part 2 of our Splatoon 2. We are just finishing up, unfortunately. But tell you what, it's lovely to have you here. Maybe have a rewatch of the video, and you can even watch part 1 as well if you like, Phase. But yeah, if you tune in tomorrow, we're starting a new game. So that should be a lot of fun. A new animation, I should say. All right. So to finish this up, let's go to define, calculate, winner. All right. So once we're there, we need to grab an if. We're going to ask these questions. We're going to ask the question: is the blue player score bigger than the red player score? Then we're going to ask the question, is the red player score bigger than the blue player score? And then we're going to ask the question, are they actually the same? So first of all, let's get an if. So if then, drag that out from control. We've done these before. So then we need a more than. And the one that we need is, so if you go to operators, the green category, and look for, you should find there are these little 6-sided jewel-shaped operators here. And the first one in that little group of 3 should have an arrow that's pointing towards the 50. This is the more than symbol. So now all we need to do is go back to variables and have a look, and we need to ask the question. Let's ask the question, is the blue player score? So drag out that blue player score variable, put it in the first socket of our operator. and then drag out the red player score and put it in the second operator. So now this piece of code is the blue player score more than the red player score. If that's true, who's won? Answers in chat. If you don't know, that's fine. Come with me. We're going to go to Events, the yellow category, on the left side of the screen. We're going to grab Broadcast. Broadcast, and drag that out, that broadcast something, and put it inside the if. And the answer is yes, Ms. Yeti, blue. So if the blue player score is more than the red player score, who's won? The blue player has won. Yes, quite right, Cool Trish, quite right. So then broadcast blue player wins. So to do this again, all we need to do is right-click on the if, normal click on duplicate. We've got all this again. Make sure it goes nicely on the bottom, doesn't get sucked up inside. And then all you need to do is change the question so that it's asking, is the red player more than the blue player? So just swap those over. And if so, who's won? Answers in chat. The answer is the red player. So again, you click on that white triangle. And then the final question that we ask, if neither of these is true, we can duplicate this again, is are they the same? And to do that, you grab out the equals symbol from operators. We're going to drag our red player score and our blue player score. We're going to put them inside the if then, and we're going to change this broadcast to draw. So, final test. I know I went through all that sort of calculate winner stuff a bit fast, but I think it's mostly makes sense. I'll leave it up on the screen just for a little bit longer for you guys to pick up on. So now we should have code that allows you in your two-player painting game Now there's one thing we don't have in this code, and that's we don't have any code that stops the game once it starts counting. So that's a thing that we could add in, but I won't be adding it in this time. All right, so I'm going to stop there. We're going to wait for it to kind of count everything up. And then blue player wins comes up on the screen. So there we go. Everything should be working. So does anyone have any little issues with that? And so the only thing that I would do now is I would move some of these variables around so that we've got the scores kind of in the corner. You don't even need to necessarily have these scores here. Oh, it's close. Look, they're both on like 68,000 something. And then what I've done, what I like to do, is I right-click on this timer variable just where it is on the game screen, and I just normal click on large readout and then just put it right in the middle there, and that looks nice and neat. And the other thing that you can do, and you can do this in your own time, is change the backdrop to like maybe a grey color or something like that. That's pretty straightforward, isn't it? This one, yeah, something like that. So there we go. Everything's fully functional. Does anyone have any glitches? I think that's pretty much everything. I liked having the graph in the background just so that we can have a think about coordinates. So I hope that coordinates make a bit more sense to you now. I know that it can sometimes be a bit tricky to understand. And you can actually see that you can do some pretty impressive kind of code to do like pixel counting and that kind of thing. You can see that the game gets a little bit jerky when it starts counting because it's doing some other stuff. Yep, blue player wins. Very nice. Yeah, so that is, yeah, that's the game finished basically. There are other things that you could do in your own time to improve it if you wanted. You could add in more players maybe. There's always more stuff you could do as well. So yeah, hopefully everyone's got it sorted. If you have any problems, just let me know in chat and we'll fix them before we finish. Otherwise, I've got a big announcement. Next week, we're going to be dropping down to 2 streams a week instead of 3. So we're starting to reopen physical programs and libraries. So I'm starting to go in part-time to do that now. So we're starting to spend a lot of time figuring out how we're going to run our physical programs and our physical libraries. Which unfortunately, Mezietti, you're a bit far away to come to, being that you are currently in the UK, and I am currently in Western Australia. Yeah, so next week, so that I've got some time to start help out with all of those sorts of preparations for physical programs, we're going to drop down to 2 times a week, and then probably what will happen is we want to keep these going even once physical distancing and all that sort of stuff isn't happening. We want to keep these going online. We really like doing this. My bosses want me to keep doing them. But we'll probably, again, cut them down maybe again so that I'm only doing them maybe once every week or something like that. And then that way I have time to be running physical coding lessons in libraries. Because most of you I know personally, I've met you, you've come to my lessons in person, and I know that we're all eager to start doing things in person again. So I'm looking forward to that. And we've got to make sure that we're doing it safely. We're taking it very seriously. So next week, as of next week, we're going to be doing 2 sessions, Tuesday and Thursday. But this week, we're still doing our 3. So we have today. Tomorrow is going to be, we're going to do an epic journey animation. It's going to be a really good session for new people. So FaZe, if you're still around, come by tomorrow at 4 p.m. 4 p.m. Western Australia time. I don't know if you live in Western Australia, FaZe. You don't need to tell me, but it's 4 p.m. Western Australia time. And we'll be running another one of these. We're doing an epic journey animation tomorrow. That should be a lot of fun, really good for new people. And on Thursday, oh goodness, what are we doing on Thursday? Oh yes, on Thursday, I'm going to show you how to make a spooky flashlight mechanic in your game, where there's a flashlight and everything else is dark. And there was a Scratch April Fool's or Halloween event where it let you put a flashlight sort of thing in your game. But this is using exclusively just Scratch coding, so this is quite cool. Yes, the streams won't ever end, but they will definitely become a lot less frequent. Certainly, I can't keep doing them 3 times a week, as I'm starting to do physical stuff in libraries now. Yeah, so thank you for coming. I hope you've had fun making Splatoon. You'll have to let me know in the comments who always wins between you, your parents, your siblings, that kind of thing. That's one of the funniest things about 2-player games, is that you just start challenging everyone around you to see who can win at the game. But yeah, so we do these at 4 p.m. And we'll be doing Tuesday and Thursday at 4 p.m. Next week, Tuesday and Thursday at 4 p.m. I'll let you know what the next streams are. As always, you can leave comments in the YouTube video for if you have suggestions for games you'd like me to do tutorials on how to make in the future. If you have run into any problems or you've got any questions, you can also message me on Scratch. You can see me here. My profile is Palethorn. You can friend me on Scratch and send me messages. I've already got a few messages, I think, from Cool Trish already that I need to reply to. So until I see you guys tomorrow at 4 p.m. For our epic journey animation lesson, stay awesome, be cool to each other, and take care of yourselves. We'll see you next time, ninjas.